This is the Alternative Investing Advantage podcast from Advanta IRA, where we show you how to explore investments beyond Wall Street and open your eyes to new options for your portfolio. It's time to take control and give yourself the freedom to choose where you invest your money.
Hi, and welcome to another edition of the Alternative Investing Advantage podcast. My name is Alex Perny, and today we're very pleased to welcome on two guests, Eric and Deven Wohlwend, with the Real Power Family radio show. I'm very excited to have both of these guests on, because it's always interesting to have a family, if you will, on to our podcast to talk about not necessarily anything extremely specific as far as like we've done with other guests. The one that's going to be going out previous to this, I'm not always necessarily sure of, but we cover things from investing in assisted living facilities to investing in precious metals to commercial real estate and all of the other ancillary things that go along with that. But this one's going to be a little bit more general and kind of illustrating how people aren't necessarily you're not necessarily stuck in where you're at. There's an ability to navigate through life to put yourself into a better position if you're, willing to take a different examination of what's going on around you. And we certainly do have a great success story that can be told today with Eric and Deven. So Eric, I'll let you kind of lead off with giving us a little introduction about yourself, and we'll go from there.
Thank you very much, Alex. It is a pleasure to be here. I'd like to thank you for having both my son and I. And like you had said, we now have the Real Power Family radio show. This is not something I thought I was going to do. It just kind of evolved. I knew I was going to be a doctor at one point in my life. I was a medic in the Army. I went through pre-med. And then 2 weeks before med school started, I went in search of my life. I ended up teaching high school anatomy and physiology for a year. Somehow fell into real estate. And for the last 20 years, that's been my life. And what I realized in the first couple of years is all these old guys had all this real estate. I mean, they had like 40 and 50 properties apiece. And they were living good lives and going on cruises with their wives and doing what they wanted to do. But the vast majority of their kids didn't want anything to do with their real estate. And I wondered why that was. I decided I was determined to raise my family differently. And then I thought back to when I was a teenager. There was a guy that started a very good chain of stores. And one by one, I helped to close those stores down just as a stock boy, as his son made decisions that weren't spectacular. So apparently he was a great lawyer, but he was not a great CEO. And I wanted to make sure my kids knew what it took to run this company. And so I started learning about that. And in the course of doing more than 1,000 rehabs, and I still own many hundreds of properties, I got my kids involved. But it wasn't out there spraying for bugs and knocking on doors late at night collecting rent and cash. And it definitely wasn't sanding drywall. It was teaching them what they really need to know. So we wrote a book about that. Everybody kept saying, hey, your kids show up to all these conferences, which if you've been at any of the big conferences, you've probably seen our whole family walking around. I'm the only one there with 2 teenagers. And people kept saying, hey, how do you do this? So my wife and I sat down and wrote the book, Family Success Triangle. And then Deven ended up writing a series of books. He's got 3 of them. 2 are bestsellers right now. And I'll let him tell you more about that. But my entire thing was, I didn't just want to build a real estate empire. I wanted to create true generational wealth. I wanted to show them that this can be a business, not a job. It can provide everything you need out of life. So you never need to go to work. And when you do, you can maximize your time. That way you have plenty of time with your family. And that's really the essence of our book, is to integrate your family, your investing, and your business. Deven,
fantastic. Take it away.
Why did you get interested in any of our businesses?
Well, Dad, you had always brought me up and raised me around the business. You had, as you say, integrated me into the business. You were showing me things about it, but not just here's the things we need to do. You were showing me the positive. Here are the benefits we get from this. Here's all of the freedom we get because we have this business. And then it was just, yeah, I want that freedom too. So, of course I'm going to want to get involved in this. And then just at a very young age, I said, hey, Dad, how do I actually get started in investing? Because actually at 5 years old, I walked up to you and said, hey, Dad, I think it's time that I should start investing. What can I invest in? And you had told me to invest in what I knew. And the only thing I knew at the time was Legos. So I found a way to invest in that. Then, a couple years later, I decided it was time for me to start buying real estate. And with some of your help, I found a way to do that.
Fantastic. And Devin, just so our listeners kind of get a gauge of your experience, how old are you currently?
I'm currently 16 years old.
Fantastic. I know of all the things I was doing when I was 16, I don't think talking to my father about anything besides football practice and
Girls.
maybe what I was doing in high school and my girlfriend was anything on my list. So that's definitely impressive. And I would say, to the fact that you were investing in Legos, probably not in all essence the worst thing to invest in. Those things are so expensive. You could probably make an absolute killing just buying and selling Legos. I would imagine, again, I don't have kids, but I still do like to play with toys. But I would imagine that Legos could be relatively lucrative. But I digress. So that's really awesome to kind of see how you back to Eric, see how you really kind of positioned something to, help your entire family. It's not just saying, hey, I'm going to go try to find the best job I can. I'm going to make this pardon the pun, but a family affair, really bring everyone into it to get everyone, and again, another pun, get invested in what we're doing. I guess this kind of leads into a lot of double entendres maybe, but, kind of really getting people involved in and passionate about what everyone's doing. So I think that definitely helps to lead to success. I think the best place to start with anything is always right at the beginning. So you said you started investing in real estate, Eric, about 20 years ago. So that means that, 2003, 2004 is kind of when you got your foot in the door of transitioning from what you were doing previously into real estate. So let's maybe kind of start there a little bit. And, how did you initially, what did your first few deals look like? What kind of lessons did you learn along the way? And what really kind of lit that fire for you to say that real estate is really going to be the path forward and the best path forward for myself and my family?
Well, what lit the fire was really easy. I lost my third job in 2 years, and it was a lot easier to tell my wife, good news, honey, I'm a full-time real estate investor, than I lost my third job in 2 years. And she immediately saw through that and asked me if I lost another job. But I had read Rich Dad, Poor Dad and Cash Flow Quadrant, and then I started picking up every book and cassette tape and CD. Yes, we still had cassette tapes back then. And my last job, I drove 40 minutes each day. I worked 6.5 hours a day, and I didn't have a job. I just sat there babysitting a bunch of people. And unless there was a terrorist attack, I didn't really have much to do. By the way, it was the Army. So when I got transferred from active back to reserve, you can't pay your bills on one weekend a month. So I decided, hey, I'm going all in on this real estate thing. I've read enough of these books. I've listened to enough podcasts or actually cassette tapes and CDs. I'm just going to do this. And I would go in, and the next thing you need to know, it was pre-2009. So anybody that could fog a mirror could get a loan. I went in. I owned exactly one rental property when I lost my last job. In 2003, I say I got started about the middle of 2003 when I lost that job. Within 2 years, I bought 20 units. And that was a 6-unit, a 4-unit, maybe a duplex or two, and the rest were houses. And I went in, I fixed them up, and I went out and refinanced, which many years later, they started calling that BRRRR. So I did the BRRRR method, and my intention really was just to flip a couple of houses, buy 7 acres on an airport. I was a skydiving instructor working on my rigger certification. I wanted to take over a skydiving business. And then I realized this guy is like 65 or almost 65. And he says, next year, I'll start getting Social Security. Then we can really grow this business. And I might not have been at business school, but even I know that you have a business to earn money. You don't get your retirement so you can put it into your business. That seemed backwards to me. So I decided maybe if I can make enough money for the down payment, why wouldn't I just keep doing the real estate thing? And rather than selling and paying 10% in commissions and closings and giving 10% off for everything I sell, I could get an 80% loan, put virtually the same amount of money in my pocket, and keep the house and make $50 a month. Now, you can't live on $50 a month, but if you do a few hundred of those, you can. And I didn't even understand the inflation that we had. Oh, especially the last couple of years with rents going up $100 per unit per month. Multiply that by 100 or 400, and that's a significant difference in your life.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely, kind of to have an experience like that where you can kind of see do the comparative analysis to, what you had kind of been passionate about with, skydiving at that point and trying to go into that business versus, doing real estate full time or really kind of making that your core focus. I think that's really an opportunity that's, most people don't realize when it's presented in front of them. A lot of people, get into real estate initially, they dabble, maybe they do that first deal, but they're really kind of struggling to make that transition into doing it full time or really committing what it takes to, not have other jobs to support that. And, that's really kind of interesting that you would say that, because I think that's a good point to bring up to people. If you take something away, realize that the lesson that you need to learn might be right in front of you, even though you're not realizing that it's being presented to you. That aha moment doesn't always necessarily happen. You might have to look a little bit for that. So to kind of bring that up and to the forefront, I think is important for people. So that kind of brings you up to 2009. And, with your son, Devin, saying that he's 16, we're getting close to when you're actually starting a family. So, you start the family, you get through all the fun stuff that happened in real estate between 2006 and 2010, which I'm sure was fun. Any kind of anecdotal stuff of how you kind of helped to navigate that period in real estate? Because that wasn't fun for anyone in real estate, or really anyone in the world for that matter.
Yeah, 2007, Devin was born in March. And that was really when everything started. It wasn't until 2009 the banks collapsed, but real estate really started collapsing in 2007. So here I am, I'm doing maybe 10 rehabs at a time. And I realized that this can't go on forever. I was too young. I'd been investing for about 4 years to really understand it. But I did understand that it wasn't going to keep going the way it was. So I slowed down and only had about 3 rehabs going. And ended up getting stuck, not being able to refinance those 3. So I picked up my first partner, and she refinanced them. And basically, I gave her 30% of the deal if she put her name on the loan so we could refinance, because she didn't have, she had incredible credit, and her house was paid off. That was how I first got my first partnership. Okay. Since then, I've picked up a couple more partners, but not a lot. But the funny part of the story is Devin is born. He's 2 weeks old, and we close on an 8-unit building. And so we've got a picture. I spent so much time with this lady. She's sitting there holding my baby. And they're like, oh, that's cute. Is that grandma? I'm like, no, it's my realtor. So he spent as much time with Ginger as he did with grandma back then, I think. And he learned to sleep. He slept better in his pack and play at a job site, because we hired people and they got behind. I was not a good enough leader, or I hired the wrong people, whatever. It was my fault. So we ended up going over, and my wife would do all the painting, and she'd paint most of an apartment in a 3-day weekend, and then we'd work in the office for 4 days. And while she was in the apartment I finished up the week before, I'd be in the next one finishing all the drywall that the electrician cut out to run in new baseboard heats. So I'd do the drywall, get everything done and ready for her, and then she'd paint it the next weekend, and then the week after that, they'd deliver the appliances and we'd move somebody in. And Devin ended up 3 days a week sleeping with a compressor going in the next room right beside his pack and play. And he slept great like that. That's kind of how he grew up.
That's fantastic. So, you said something interesting at the beginning of it, is that when you were going through this, period of about roughly, let's call it 7 to 10 years in the beginning of your real estate career, you saw that a lot of people, that were successful in real estate had families that just had no interest. The sons, the daughters, they just had zero interest in taking that over. So what are some of the things that you kind of identified, when you saw that really, that would speak to you of saying, here's maybe why they didn't? Was it not getting their children involved early enough? Was it just not the education factor? Was it, again, kind of just having that divorce between, what you do professionally and your family life. Like, what do you think was some of the reasons for that helped you to identify, hey, here's why I want to bring my family into this and what I can do to make it more palatable and engaging for my family?
I would love to say that I was that intelligent. I probably wasn't. I think maybe it was the other way. I was more of a teenager and realized I'm still skydiving every afternoon or every weekend whenever I can get away. And I did that until it became less fun when my wife wasn't jumping when she got pregnant with Devin. And I didn't want to hang out at the drop zone all weekend. But skydivers aren't necessarily known to me the most mature of people. And I just started thinking, as my kids grow up, would they think this is fun? We have to make it fun. And I could not stand sanding drywall. I keep coming back to that. So if you're a drywaller, if you're that one person out of 1,000 that enjoys that, I'm sorry. That is definitely not me. But my kids, especially Ethan, his little brother who's 14 and just finished his last rehab last week, he loves the deconstruction phase. So we took him in when he was like 7. He bought a 6-unit building. And that's a good story. You'll have to talk to Ethan about that one. But he flipped a mobile home, used that money he made to put a down payment on a 6-unit for a guy that was behind in payments. And he got to go in. There was a couple of water damaged units, which is why I got it so cheap. And he went in and was in karate and just learned the sidekick. So he was sidekicking all the drywall, knocking it down. And Devin went in. Fun. Yeah. And Devin liked the prettier stuff. So I think he was like 2 years old. Mom dressed him up all in white and gave him some white primer and stuck him down in a 1,500 square foot open box for one of our commercial units and gave him a paintbrush. I mean, what could you mess up? We're putting in all new flooring. We're painting all the wall. And he just thought it was cool to go to work with Mom. And he is painting like this. He got as much paint on him as he did on the wall. But he had a bunch of fun doing it. So we made it fun. And then we also, we don't work all the time. We go out and we travel a lot. And they kind of like not going through TSA. They like jumping on our airplane and flying wherever they want, whenever they want. So when Devin had a girlfriend that was hours away, we flew him down to see her. That way we didn't have to drive for hours, especially since he didn't have a driver's license. And if Ethan wants to go visit somebody, then we can just, he wanted to go to the beach. So we just flew down to the beach when Devin was at Boy Scouts. And we always let them know it is because of our business that we have the ability to pay for these things. This is not necessarily normal. Don't get used to this. You need to earn it. If you want this, then you need to prove you are worthy to the world, not to me and Mom, but to everybody else out there.
Yeah, that's really kind of interesting how, it's not necessarily making it out to be like, most people, when, at least from the engagement that I get, and again, I don't have children, so I just kind of use this anecdotally, but, it seems like a lot of times when people engage their children, you hear stories about, it's like, oh, well, my dad made me go to work for this. And it's that kind of, it's showing that, hey, like, yeah, this is work. It's are there other things you'd rather be doing? For instance, skydiving, Devin, I'm sure you have hobbies as well. It's like, would you rather be, painting primer or, fixing some water damaged drywall? Or would you rather be doing this? Well, if you'd like to do that, here's the path forward. We can clearly show you from a young age that it's not just, a 9 to 5. Here's what can afford this lifestyle that we like so much. And, try to make it fun. Again, if you have some demo to do, it's like, hey, you want to go karate kick some drywall? Absolutely. It sounds like a pretty good time to, again, me too, but I especially would imagine a teenager or someone younger. It's like, hey, you want to go break a whole bunch of stuff and not get in trouble for it? Absolutely. So that's
close to a year ago, and I want to have Devin chime in on this to get his point of view. That's another thing we do is we ask their opinion. We don't tell them what to do or what to think. We ask their opinion. And it would have been an awful lot easier for me. It was a lot more convenient when Devin got his driver's license 6 or 8 months ago. If he would have worked for my construction company, I was way behind. I really needed people to work for me. But he chose to work for his mom's real estate brokerage. And he would rather put on a suit and go work in an office. And it turned out he was incredibly good at it. He leased 3 times. He actually took over we kind of demoted his mother, and at 15, a couple weeks before he turned 16, he took over as COO. And by the end of that year, they signed 3 times as many leases as the year before that. But he is brilliant. He follows the system. He can de-escalate a conflict and keep people from moving out when they get mad. So it was just fantastic. Our occupancy has never been so high. So we didn't push him into what we wanted to do. We gave him the option. What would you like to do? Show me what you like the most, and then show me you're good at it. And he had a natural aptitude for that. Where the other one, we're constantly driving him, dropping him off at job sites because he would much prefer to get dirty than go out and work in an office.
Fantastic. So, Deven, I'd like to bring this over to you a little bit. Now, we, kind of have covered the story, thus far from, how your dad, got into real estate, the identification of, why I want to bring my family into this, and kind of how bringing your family into this can not just be like, hey, here's a chore to do it so we can have money. You said you started out with, Legos, kind of seeing that, if you want something in life, you need to engage and, provide for yourself in that regard. So, let's kind of bring it up to when, you first wanted to make the step and to try to invest in real estate. Talk us through your first deal. I mean, I've asked that question to, we've done over 100 episodes of this podcast, and, almost every single person that invests in something, I always like to ask, like, hey, how'd you, what was your first deal look like? I certainly asked your dad that question, but I will safely say you were the youngest person that I've asked that to. And getting, especially a younger person's perspective, comparatively to this, what did that look like for you? Were there trepidations? What kind of, mistakes did you make? And, how did you feel that the first one went?
Well, my first deal, I had talked to my dad and, hey, Dad, I'd like to start investing in real estate. And he helped me find a property that was for sale, or as two partners that had bought a property, and they were flipping the property. They got a loan with a balloon on it, and it was coming up very quickly, so they needed to sell it. They were a motivated seller. Then I came along and I could solve their problem, and so they were willing to sell to me for a significantly lower price than it was worth, at least in my opinion. That's how I got a private lender, or a regular person pretty much, to loan on the property, because even though I was just getting started and I'm very young, even if I didn't pay the mortgage and they got the house, they would still make a decent amount of money. It was a $80,000 house I was buying for $50,000. Then I still had to come up with a down payment, which was $1,000, which was a lot of money for me at the time, and in the grand scheme of things, wasn't that bad. And then I got that, and Dad, with your, encouragement, I got, I believe, a 9-year loan on it, and so I still own that house today.
Fantastic.
So basically, it's important to say, I have never, and no one that is related to my children have ever loaned them money. We have never went out and signed for a bank loan. We have had a series of adults that some of them loaned money to me, and so they decided that, yeah, I'd rather loan money to Deven. And I'm sure they might have thought, well, if he doesn't pay, Dad will bail him out. But the key has always been, if I ever pay a penny for you, you're going to sell me the house. I'm not taking over and helping you out. You have to prove. What would you do if you weren't there? I saw far too many people, not only their kids didn't want to get in real estate, but they just gave them the real estate. You can't give them anything. If you give them something, maybe loan them a down payment. And I stress, loan them a down payment for their own personal home. But you don't do that for their investments, because it's not their money they're investing. Then they won't think as much of it if it's not their money they're losing. So I am very adamant. I don't loan my kids money for investing. As a matter of fact, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just saying that's a good point. It's the value add of having some type of stake in what you're doing. If it's, I think that's kind of the trouble people get in on Wall Street so much, is that, it's not your money you're playing with.
Right.
So what happens if you lose it, or anything in life? If people get something, inherently, quote, for free, you're not necessarily more apt to take, better care of it. It's, why hotel rooms get trashed so often.
Exactly.
My wife's been in the hotel industry for, more than a decade. And it's like, you wouldn't do that in your own home. It's like, well, it's not my home. So.
And when you own 500 of your own rentals, you tend to understand that people don't take care of them. I can't believe I've never replaced a door in my house other than when I first bought it. We painted. When we bought this house in 2005, we painted. And I've never had to patch the drywall anywhere. Not a single time did I accidentally punch a hole in the drywall. And not a single time did I drop a couch through the window or something. And yet, these things just accidentally happen with some of my rentals. Not a single time did I degrease an engine in my bathtub. I'm just saying.
I will say I'm a big car guy. I did use a barbecue grill to set enamel on a car part once, but I get it. There's exceptions to everything, but my wife wasn't too thrilled. But I told her, I'm like, hey, look, we were in the market for a new barbecue grill. I need to do this. And, she was like, okay, yeah, that was a fun story for another time. But suffice it to say,
maybe buy her the new grill first. And then say, oh, look, I can repurpose this. It wasn't a total waste.
It was pretty funny. She walked outside and she's like, we already ate. And I'm like, yeah, we did. Don't look on the grill. She's like, why is there an intake manifold in the grill? I'm like, I don't know.
She obviously picked the right wife. She knows what an intake manifold is. I don't even know.
Well, the funny thing is she painted it. She did the enameling on it. It was a Jeep I was restoring, and it had the firing order on it. So she individually enameled each number and the casting and everything. And I didn't tell her that you have to set that stuff with high heat, and she just assumed you let it dry. And we've been married for 10 and a half years now, so I guess I'm doing something right.
You did good. Yes.
So Devin, kind of back to you on this. You kind of get through your first deal, and everything doesn't always go as planned. What would you say? I mean, and maybe it did. There's exceptions to every rule, but what would you say were some of your biggest learning points that you weren't necessarily aware that you were going to learn in that first deal? Was it simply just maybe shaking off the jitters of kind of going out and doing it your first time? Was it something you didn't realize about the negotiating process? I mean, you probably had a good basis of knowledge just by being in proximity to your father and the businesses that he ran. But you learn the most stuff by experiencing stuff firsthand. So what were some of the things that you really took away from that first time doing it that you realized were, hey, I need to take this and put it in the bank? And maybe was anything, do you feel, specific to your age as well?
Tell them about all the mistakes you made with your Legos. That was really your first deal where you really learned a lot.
Yeah, let me do that. Excuse me. Here, give me a second.
Go for it.
Sorry.
I thought it was important, it was more important for them to learn. And $500 was an incredible amount of money for a 5-year-old. And it's a lot easier to fail with 500 than 50,000 or 500,000. And I know this is not school. This is not the classroom. Everybody fails. It is just a matter of failing and getting up one more time than you get knocked down. That is what made me successful. And I wanted to teach my kids that they could skin their knee and they weren't going to die. So how did I teach you some of those lessons, Devin?
Well, yeah, in my first deal, I had decided to invest, and I made a bunch of mistakes. Like when buying the set, or actually figuring out I was going to make money. I just looked at things and figured out, oh hey, if I can buy the Lego set for $400. And then they stop making it, price goes up a bunch, and I can sell it for frequently close to double. I can make money with that. All right, that went well. Then, all right, now let's make the money to buy the set. That's the first tricky part for me. Remember, I'm 5 years old at the time and don't make that much money. Also, my dad never gave me an allowance. Like he said earlier, he doesn't give me any money. He never has. So, if I want something, I have to earn the money for it. Frequently, that's by working for one of his companies doing whatever I knew how to do. So I work for him, and I'm making money, but it's taking me a long time to earn the money. So I decide, you know what? Let's get a partner. And who better than my younger brother, Ethan, who makes even less money than I do.
But he was comfortable.
Yeah, he was the comfortable option, not the best option. So that was one of my first mistakes, is choosing the wrong partner. So it took me too long, and Lego actually retired the set before I bought it, which is how, and I eventually made the money for the set, but not before the price went up an extra $100. Remember, 5 years old, that's a lot of money for me. Then, we buy the set, we wait, price still goes up enough that we can still make some money with this. Then, Lego releases a new version of the set before we sell our set, because we tried to use the cheaper option, Craigslist, rather than putting it on eBay, because they wanted a 10% commission. And Ethan and I decided, or probably more I decided, I don't want to waste extra money. We've already lost enough because we waited too long to buy it. Then, after they released the new set, the price went back down to about what we had paid for it.
So if you look in this one scenario with a $400 Lego Death Star, he actually went out and figured out. I told him, go invest in what you know. And he says, I don't really know anything but Legos, Dad. And I was like, well, find a way to invest in that. And I'm sitting here at my desk right here saying, oh man, I just bought myself somewhere between a couple hours and a couple days. I'm going to crush this kid if I can't help him find a way to invest in Legos. I don't know how to invest in Legos. How are you going to do that? I immediately think start renting them out, which there is a place, or at least there used to be, called Plego. And that is why he got interested in earning money, because I said, you can have anything you want and you will earn the money to do it. So you will, wash the dishes and clean the house and mow the yard, whatever it is that's age appropriate. You have to do that just to live here. And obviously we give you a warm bedroom and you help us chop firewood and you get a food. But if you're working in one of our businesses, we'll pay you, and we'll pay you what we would pay somebody else that does as good as you. So at the beginning, they got paid a whole lot less than the adults. Now he's making more than some of the adults because he takes a lot more responsibility than them. But he learned in that first lesson, he has to earn money faster. He never considered borrowing the money. That really wasn't something he thought about. He did figure out he should take a partner. He accidentally got right by timing the market, but then he blew that by taking too long to come up with the money with his little brother because he picked the wrong partner. Then he cheaped out and didn't hire the real estate agent. In this case, it was eBay. So everything in the future, he has never had that problem again. He learned it's better to give the agent a couple $1,000s because they are way better at marketing and have the MLS and other things if you're going to sell something. But you can teach your kids all of this stuff doing something they love. In this case, it was Legos. And then a couple years later, since then, he said, all right, well, he learned how to invest in gold and silver. He bought some Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. He was studying, learning, and trading that stuff. And by the time he was 7, he decided he wanted to buy a house. And I said, great. As many of these deals as I've done, it really doesn't take any money down. And if you're brand new and you need to get into a no money down deal, it's really hard. It is a lot easier for me to get a no money down deal than it is for some new guy with zero experience.
Because you have a track record.
Right. You need a track record. You need that, like you wrote about in your first book, If I Could Do It, So Can You. You wrote that entire chapter about credit. And it's not necessarily credit with the bank. It's not your credit score. It's that people know, like, and trust you. They believe in you, and they're willing to loan you money. Maybe it's because you're giving them a loan on a property where there's $30,000 in equity, and maybe it's because you have done a deal with them before. But since then, I know you are writing the promissory note and mortgage for a friend of ours, another young investor who happens to be 10 years older than you. But you're loaning him money today out of your IRA, aren't you?
Pretty much.
So he has learned how to borrow the money and also how to lend it out and when to use it. I mean, we do different things. I know you have your IRA company, which I'm a huge fan of investing in IRAs. At some times, you have to know when to split. What's a better deal to put in the IRA and what's a better deal to do on your own?
Yeah, and I tell people that a lot is, the spectacle of being able to invest with, not having to pay any taxes is very compelling.
It's awesome. I love it. Yeah.
It's like, would you rather pay some tax or no tax? And dollars to donuts, that people typically take the latter option. But you're exactly right. And that's kind of true with anything in investing, is understanding where the benefit lies. Not everything is the most beneficial for you to do in any avenue, just because it, looks great and is shiny and awesome. Sometimes there might be a better avenue for you, for doing anything really, and especially in life. And one point I'll make before we kind of transition a little bit is, I think it's kind of important to note is that, again, speaking completely outside the realm of someone that has children, but I think the point that, wasn't necessarily said that's important is that, you can, make this, especially if you're listening to this in the context of saying, hey, how do I get my family involved in this? Especially if you have children, is that it doesn't always, the first foray into investing doesn't have to be with the family business. You can teach the lessons in something that's palatable. And just because, something is, a game, or maybe not necessarily something that, the old mantra of like, oh, you're wasting your time, it's a silly game, that game was sold. You paid money for something, whether it be Legos, video games, or X, Y, and Z. There's a market for something. If you can make money at it and be successful and, provide for yourself and your family, who's to say, again, so long as you're not hurting anyone, and it's ethical, if you're, for whatever that means to anyone else. But, especially with something like Legos, they're expensive. You have to go out and buy them. Just because it's a game or it's a, child's toy doesn't mean that it's not necessarily valuable. You can't learn valuable lessons, not just monetary, but the lessons you learn can be incredibly important. So I think that's an important thing to take away from that specifically. Now, to kind of transition a little bit, free this over to Devin, you learn these, lessons about, paying for marketing, about, choosing whom you invest with regard to your partners, timing markets, understanding holding costs. There's a lot of really valuable lessons that you learn from buying a Death Star. Maybe plugging that vent on the top of it so that way someone can't drop a bomb down it from an X-Wing, but I digress.
Yeah.
So, with that said, taking some of those lessons into your first deal. And one thing I'd like to get, your opinion on is that, it's easier enough for, someone like me, and not necessarily in the context of my profession and being involved in investing for as long as I have, but just someone older, to approach someone, you talk about that credit people have. And unfortunately, credit is given, relatively arbitrarily just because of someone's age. What were some of the hurdles that you had to overcome by being someone younger and being a young person, trying to invest in real estate? How did you try to go out there and present yourself to where you, gained or clawed back some of that credit that's just, again, arbitrarily given for people that are just happen to be older?
Well, I'm not sure that it's just always given to people that are older. I went to a lot of real estate meetings, and as for me building my credit, even before I started investing, my dad brought me to the weekly breakfast meeting that I think he started, but a bunch of people showed up there, and I was there every week. I was always wearing a suit like I am today, and I just was always showing up there, always acting professional, and just over time, oh yeah, he's just a well-behaved, fairly professional kid. And then when I actually wanted to start investing, I just, you know what? He seems more professional than some of the adults that are walking in here in shorts and a t-shirt.
So maybe out of necessity, I started a Wednesday morning breakfast for our local RIA group, and he went to all the RIA meetings, but I was carrying him in a baby carriage. And, he's got this little carrier pops out of the truck. I sit him there, and I'm running the meeting, so I don't really care if somebody doesn't like him being there.
Yeah.
And I was like, hey, what are they going to say? I said, well, if they want my free advice, then they can deal with my child. Next thing I know, he's sitting up, eating his own food. And, Dad, can I go out? There's a play area right outside the room that you meet in. Yeah, go ahead. Now, I know everybody in this little restaurant. So he goes out and plays. And next thing I know, he's a couple years older, and he's sitting in there for longer and longer during the meeting. And I'm like, you can go play if you want, Devin. He's like, no, I kind of am interested. This is kind of good. And then he would start interjecting his ideas. And I mean, sometimes they were 4 and 5-year-old ideas, and other times they were just brilliant, think outside the box. I love to think about this semi-truck is driving underneath a bridge and it gets stuck. And everybody is freaking out. How can we get this out of there? We need a crane. How much is that going to damage the bridge? Can we lift this up a little bit to pull it out? And a little kid walks by, and he's like, why don't you just let the air out of the tires? But he saw something that all the adults couldn't see because he wasn't, initialized. He wasn't just stuck in his own little box like us. He was so creative. And he did something like that, so we named him. Are you the director of imagination?
Yep, that would be me.
And that was his first corporate role.
Yep. You had never given me limiting beliefs. Like, I never had that box that I thought inside of. And one thing you mentioned earlier is getting over the jitters of buying my first deal or whatever. I never had that, really, because why should I be afraid? This is just normal. Okay, we'll go buy a house. That's normal. I mean, at least to me, it seemed normal. And
I
so,
have
of
bought
course,
a unit every 7 to 10 days for 20-some years. It's not uncommon to buy 40 a year. So for him, going to a closing, it's just normal. I was like, hey, Devin, get this set up for me quick. We need a loan. He goes, all right, I'll write the mortgage and note for you, Dad. And he's been doing this since he was 7 or 8, writing my mortgage. I was like, go download that from the recorder site. We need the legal description. All right, Dad, I'll do that for you. And he got to be better at it than some of the employees at the real estate brokerage because they come and go every few years, and he's been around, and then he used it for himself. And I think it's important to know that we've only talked about his Death Star in his first house. How many units do you own right now, Devin?
I currently own 48 units.
Nice.
And how much did I help you with, what'd you buy last, a duplex?
Yep, my latest deal was a duplex, and you did pretty much nothing. You have literally never been to the property. I got the deal, I negotiated it, I went through the property, I set up the financing with a lender you have never used. I helped, even working in the property, to do the one rehab that was needed, and then I ran the management company that got it rented.
So I have never seen it, didn't know where it came from, and don't know the lender that you borrowed from, or at least I've never borrowed from him.
Yep.
So, there is no aspect of this business that he doesn't do for his deals. It's not like Daddy's helping him. And you get a lot of haters on social media. Look at some of the things. We post this on our Rumble and YouTube and Instagram at Real Power Family. But you can see him actually out there doing this stuff and taking responsibility. Now, you're not just going to get your average 16-year-old to do that, but if he's been doing it since he was 7, it's second nature. There is no jitters. Could you imagine if I told you you had to go to a job interview, Devin? You had to write a resume. How would you feel there?
Job interview is fine. I just treat that as a negotiation. Resumes, those things scare me. Somebody tried to tell me that I had to write one of those for college, and I went to my grandma like, what is supposed to be on these things? Because I don't know.
And I want to be clear, I'm not huge. I don't think that you need to go to college to get ahead. I think for the vast majority of people, some people it's very important, but for the vast majority, it's a total waste of time, energy, and money. That being said, Devin decided that he wanted to get an associate's degree. And like I have always taught him, you can do anything you want. I don't know why they put ages on it. It's stupid that you can't drive. If you can see over the dashboard and you're trustworthy, you should be able to drive. Well, I couldn't figure out how to shrink that. He had to wait until after he was 16 to drive. But when did you take your first in-person college class?
When I was 12 years old.
So if you want to do it, just don't hold your kids back. Originally, I started by saying, I just don't want to mess up my kids as much as most parents mess up theirs. And tell them they can do anything. But how many people have said, kid, you can do anything. If you want, you can grow up and be president. And they don't believe it themselves. And then in the next breath, they're like, we can't afford that. Or don't do that. Don't get your hopes up. They do something crushing like that. Now, let me just ask you, without going into politics, look at our current and our previous president. Tell me your kids couldn't grow up to do better than at least one of these two people. I mean, no matter what party you are, what your beliefs are, anybody can become president. And if that's what you want to do, go for it. I think it sounds horrible to me. I do not want them tearing apart my life. But if you want to run a business when you're 16 years old, you can do that. If you want to buy a house when you're 16 years old, you can do that.
I think one of the important facts, and we are kind of getting up towards the end of this, but I think an important, kind of thing to distill out of this is, you talk about not giving your kids help, and especially in like a monetary or like finding the deal portion of this, and kind of the perception that people looking in from the outside saying, oh well, Devin had help X, Y, and Z. You can give your kids help without setting them up for failure. Help by, approximately by showing them, giving them the tools, giving them, as much as I cringe at the analogy, it's like, teaching them to fish. Just because your dad's a huge successful commercial fisherman and then you go out there, you've learned the trade, you've learned how to do it. And just because you're successful at it doesn't mean that they, just paid for everything. They took you to school, they provided the education. And it's important to understand how you can do that to best set, anyone up for success. And I think it's really compelling and interesting to look at, kind of how you did that by showing, the initial, how to structure a deal by using Legos. It's, how do you think a lot of engineers want to become engineers or architects want to become architects? They play around with Legos and erector sets and connects and that kind of stuff. There's lessons to be learned everywhere in life. And just because it's not, in college or, going to a class or, working a job that provides that training doesn't mean it's not out there. You provided certainly all the tools for your children to be successful and help them in that way. But, the onus is kind of, then placed on them to go out and do it. And I think that's, again, very compelling and powerful message to kind of take away from all of this. With that said, I'm sure we could sit here and talk for hours, and I would love to, and I'm looking forward to being on your radio show as well. But any kind of parting thoughts, with this? We've kind of covered your trajectory, getting in real estate, seeing the benefit, bring your children into this, the different paths that they have both taken, removing those kind of limiting beliefs on saying, hey, you can't do this. It's like, go out and try, see if you can do it, learn the lessons, try to be successful, and you probably will be. So I'll kind of turn it over to both of you for any kind of closing thoughts on our conversation today.
I love the saying, everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die. Well, everybody wants their kid to take over what they did, but they're self-employed. Instead of working 40 hours a week for somebody else, they work 60 or 80 hours a week for them. Everything bad comes to them. They miss dinner. They, ruin fun occasions where they could be with their kids. If you want true generational wealth, you have to start with you. You've got to plan your life and make your business fit in, not the other way. You have got to run a real business, not own a job. and we set up, and your fishing example, sure, if you want your kid to be a fisherman, they might hate the smell of fish, and they might be brilliant at negotiating for new fishing boats and nets. So put them in an office on the docks or somewhere away from the fish, and they can grow your business better than you ever will. Let them pick the part of it. It doesn't need to look like what you do. In fact, it probably won't be the same as what you like. You grew up with different experiences than them. They will probably pick a different thing to focus on. It doesn't make that better or worse. It's just different. Accept them for who they are. They'll be a lot more likely to listen to you even when they're teenagers, which is somewhat unheard of if you listen to most of the people around us.
Yeah, I was a teenager. I was a teenager once, and yeah, you're not telling me anything.
Exactly. I was the same way.
All right, Devin, I'll turn it over to you for some closing thoughts.
And then once, like my dad said, run your business like a business. And then once you have your business running better and it's not just a job, show your kids the benefits of it, show them the good things about it, make it fun for them, and then they'll want to do it. And you just give them the knowledge, give them the things that you've learned, not the money, but the education, so that they can do it too.
No, absolutely. I think those are very great and compelling ending thoughts. It's been a wonderful conversation to kind of show, everyone, to throw out the term, everyone wants the generational wealth, but how do you create that? You can light the fire, but who's going to keep it going after you're gone? And this has certainly been a very compelling conversation regarding it. And I will say, Devin, welcome to being the youngest person I've ever had on this podcast. So, we're setting new information and new records today. So again, I appreciate both of y'all's time today. And I end with this a lot. The most valuable resource any of us have is not money, but it's time, because we can't make any more of it. And we only get a certain amount. So thank you very much for taking that time to spend with us today. With that said, this has been the Alternative Investing Advantage podcast. My name is Alex Perny. And as always, thank you very much for joining with us today.
Thank you for tuning in to the Alternative Investing Advantage podcast. Tune in next week for more investing tips and strategies.
Want to hear more episodes of the Alternative Investing Advantage? Search podcast at advantaira.com and subscribe.